Yes, Android 16 is coming early. In fact, it could potentially come a third of a year earlier than previous updates, plus we have some other hints about the Pixel 10, so strap in, let's get into it. You know that we love all things Android here at 9to5Google, specifically updates and information, so hit that subscribe button, as it looks like we'll actually have developer preview coverage a lot earlier this year, maybe before 2025. And if you want even more from 9to5Google, then how about becoming a channel member for all kinds of cool stuff like exclusive content, wallpapers and more in the not too distant future. I'm sure you'll love it. So let's get the obvious out of the way early. Google has officially confirmed that Android is getting 2 updates of note next year. Yes, you heard me correctly, 2 Android updates. One will come in Q2, which is effectively going to be Android 16. Then later in the year, we'll get a smaller or minor release in Q4. So for anyone keeping score or keeping track, ordinarily we get a developer preview phase in the early portion of the year. Usually that starts around February, followed by a beta that usually starts before or around Google I/O. Either way, a big beta release usually drops around Google's I/O big launch event. Then, preceding the latest Pixel hardware launch, we get an October release of the latest version of Android. This has been the playbook for a long time now, at least by my count since Android 9 Pie, which feels like an age ago. One big release we usually get that encapsulates all of the changes that we can expect for the following 12 or so months. The only deviation to that recently has been Android 12L, if you can remember that. This was designed as a stopgap update, which played nicely with larger screens, such as tablets, but most importantly, for the emerging wave of folding devices like the Galaxy Z Fold series. Android 12 itself was a huge update. Since then, Google has kept things light and mostly offered refinements to the system that is really mature at this point in time. Android 13 was a minor update, as was Android 14, and Android 15 by extension. Most of the biggest changes are going under the hood, under the radar, rather than user-facing spaces. Pixel feature drops, now called, which I don't like, Pixel drops, also have given us little upgrades and functionality changes every 3 or so months on Pixel phones, along with some decoupling of functionality with Play system updates. It feels very much like the age of the big yearly upgrade is really drawing to a close anyway. Next year, we're going to get what Google is calling a major release in Q2, so anytime from April onwards. That is bound to be Android 16. We're really hoping to see what Google is planning to do with this, with integrating in AI functionality in Gemini into the core system itself and what this will look like. Maybe though this is why the Pixel 9 launch was pushed forward slightly, to account for a major Android release mid-year. I don't know, something to ponder over. Anyway, this major release is going to be up first, then we'll get what Google is calling a minor release in Q4, which is more in line with the usual launch timeframe for previous major Android releases on those previous roadmaps, the October Android 15 launch being in Q4 itself. Outside of the major and minor Android releases, Q1 and Q3 releases of QPRs are going to be offering incremental changes and updates to the system as well. What's interesting is that both releases will include new developer APIs that include new features that apps themselves can take advantage of. So applications or application development might speed up on Android. Devs out there, you're wondering and listening to this thinking, is it time to stress out? We do think it probably is at this stage, but it is worth noting that Google states that this major Q2 release will be the only release in 2025 to include behavior changes that actually can affect applications. You still have to do compatibility testing a little earlier than usual, so apps work with this latest OS, but it is worth noting that this is the only major change that will affect the applications going forward. Luckily for you and for us, as Android catalogers, is that a word? The developer preview phase and beta program will be expedited as a result. Google hasn't actually confirmed when those will start, but surely it's going to be soon if this Android major release is coming in Q2. Let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. I'm really interested to see when it's going to be. This is just my best guess though, but I actually think November could be a good bet, or maybe December. I'm not purely concrete on that. In tandem with the insane QPR beta, which always feels confusing in and of itself, and those pixel drops, it's going to be an intense and busy period, but I'm super excited to see what Google has in store either way. At this stage though, Google's only information on the developer preview is stay tuned, so yes, stay tuned. We'll be covering it in depth and as intricately detailed as you would expect from us here at 9to5Google. You may also be wondering how the Pixel series fits in here, because I certainly am. It's far from concrete and the Pixel 10 isn't explicitly mentioned in this announcement, but the documentation states that the release schedule is shifting from Q3 to Q2 to better align with the schedule of device launches across the ecosystem, and so that more devices can get that major release of Android sooner. One of the biggest complaints when the Pixel 9 series launched was the lack of the latest OS, and one that I actually do personally agree with. It was really strange getting a flagship Pixel phone with last year's Android version. That has been corrected with the Android 15 update, but it still doesn't sit right with me in the grand scheme of things. Reading between those lines though, it looks like this is also going to be a play to improve how other OEMs roll out Android versions to their hardware. You only need to look at how late some manufacturers are with pushing new Android updates to the lineups. Samsung has recently slipped their estimate for their own version of Android 15 and One UI 7. Hopefully this will speed up the process for more than just a Pixel lineup and get Android 15 or versions of Android on newer devices in a more positive and faster note. Another positive knock-on effect that could happen here is that this change could mean that more devices in future will launch with that latest OS installed, specifically those in the latter half of the year, as some of these do end up launching on Android 14. I think that would be a big boon for Android wholesale, and to that end, Google says that they're actively working with device partners to bring the Q2 release to as many devices as possible. So it's great news across the board, and I think it's epic news whichever way you read it. More devices on the latest release means more people get to try out these new features in good time, and the quality of Android hardware and software will increase at a similar pace. With more devices getting extended support cycles above that 4-year range, getting out updates for older devices and existing devices is really important, especially as people are holding onto their phones for longer than ever. It's above that 2.5-year mark by now, so almost a third of people, as well as on top of that, are keeping their phones for 4 to 5 years. So getting Android updates out there is really good if you hold on to something for a longer time. So you're listening to all this, it's a lot of information, I appreciate that, and you're wondering what is next. Well, in the near term, we're not actually that sure. We'll likely get more QPR updates before this big change or shift. Even so, it's unclear how expediting Android 16 will affect the QPR beta long term. Could QPR 2 be cancelled if Google wants to focus on the developer preview? Well, it's really not clear at this stage. More Android beta releases could be a little confusing, but this feels like a return to that 0.1 update cycle that we saw during the middle era of Android. Think Android 4.4 or Android 8.1 Oreo in all but name. Just how AI figures into all of this does remain to be seen as well. It could change how our phones look, feel, and even operate. Maybe we'll get even more functions decoupled from the major and minor releases, which I think is where Android has major benefits over iOS, as you can still get cool functions like Quick Share without having that latest OS release anyway. So getting down to the nitty gritty, the real question here is, what is the reason for this change? Well, could it be a new form factor? Is it a way for minor releases to enable apps to take advantage of AI features from that Q4 period? Well, at this stage, we really don't know. No matter which way you look at it, I think the future of Android looks very, very different. Faster, very potentially in more bite-sized chunks, and I really like that option. I'm hopeful we'll get more information on the developer preview and beta phase soon, because time is already ticking. But what do you think about this news? Good decision or bad decision? Drop a comment down below, and a big thanks to our channel members on screen now. You keep us doing what we're doing over here, and I would love for you to stay in tune with what's coming up with Android 16. I'm excited, and I hope you are too.